The third topic that we will be discussing in this presentation is the concept of crime. And I begin the slide with crime defined, and this definition comes directly from your textbook. The author has defined crime as an act in violation of a law that causes harm, is identified by law, is committed with criminal intent, and is subject to punishment. Like I said before, criminal law in this territory is governed mainly by Title 14 of the Virgin Islands Code. And while this information here is not in your textbook, I included it in this presentation because I felt as though it would be helpful to you to have this information. Crimes are categorized as a misdemeanor or a felony, and that categorization depends on the penalty that is associated with that particular crime. For example, misdemeanor crimes are punishable with no more than 1 year incarceration. And I see a typo there. It says then, but it should actually say than. And felony crimes are punishable with more than 1 year of incarceration. And felony crimes are usually the more serious crimes. Now, the next topic I found to be very interesting. The book talks about, they continue on with this discussion of the concept of crime. And the question that is asked is, what leads a society to designate some deviant behavior as a crime and leave other wrong acts, other deviant acts, to be settled by private or civil remedies? So then the next question or what that question is really asking is, who in a society decides and when and under what circumstances which acts that are already considered deviant in that society should be elevated to the level of gross deviance or crime subject to punishment? Now, in the traditional interpretation of the historical development of legal systems and of criminal justice in particular, lawmaking is an accommodation of interests in a society, whether that society is composed of equals, as in a democracy, or of rulers and ruled, as in absolute monarchies, so as to produce a system of law and enforcement to which everybody basically subscribes. This is called the consensus model. And the book defines consensus model as a model of criminal lawmaking that assumes that members of society agree on what is right and wrong, and that law is the codification of agreed upon social values. That is, jurisdictions that subscribe to the consensus model, they allow the members of society to kind of come up with the laws, and they're the ones who determine whether or not something is a deviant act or a crime that's subject to punishment. Additionally, the consensus model assumes that members of a society, by and large, agree on what is right and wrong, and that codification of social values becomes law, which is pretty much what I just said. Now, the other model is the conflict model. And in this model, we have the criminal justice system being seen as something that's used by the ruling class to control the lower class. Criminological investigation of the conflicts within society is emphasized. So I'd like you all to be able to articulate both models, both the consensus model and the conflict model, and be able to tell me, based on these definitions, which model you think the Virgin Islands subscribes to. I won't give you the answer. I want to see how creative your thinking skills are and see if you can be able to come up with the correct answer. The fourth topic is the breaking of laws. And in this section, we are going to be talking about a hypothetical that I found to be very interesting. It's also in your textbook, so you all can refer to the textbook to look at that. But the hypothetical reads, let us analyze the following rather typical scenario. In the maximum security unit of a Midwestern penitentiary is an inmate we will call Jeff. He is one of 3 robbers who held up a check-cashing establishment. During the robbery, another of the robbers killed the clerk. Jeff has been sentenced to life imprisonment, and the governing law behind that is felony murder, and we will discuss that in greater detail at a later time. But for now, just know that Jeff was with some other guys committing a robbery. One of the other guys, not Jeff, killed the clerk, and as a result, Jeff was sentenced to life imprisonment. Jeff was born in an inner city ghetto. He was the 3rd child of an unwed mother. He had a succession of temporary fathers. By age 12, he had run away from home for the first time, only to be brought back to his mother, who really did not care much whether he returned. He rarely went to school because, he said, all the guys were bigger. At age 16, after failing 2 grades, Jeff dropped out of school completely and hung around the streets of his deteriorated, crime-ridden neighborhood. He had no job. He had no reason to go home because usually no one was there. One night he was beaten up by members of a local gang. He joined a rival gang for protection and soon began to feel proud of his membership in one of the toughest gangs in the neighborhood. Caught on one occasion tampering with parking meters and on another trying to steal a car navigation system, he was sentenced to 2 months in a county correctional institution for boys. By the age of 18, he had moved from petty theft to armed robbery. Okay, so that is Jeff's story. You guys can find that, I believe, on page 17 and 18 of your textbook. The reason why I read that hypothetical in detail was because I want to know if those environmental factors that I just mentioned about Jeff, the neighborhood that he lived in, the upbringing that he had, the single parent household, and all the other elements that I mentioned in the hypothetical, did those things make Jeff more prone to committing crimes because he appeared to have a less fortunate childhood than, let's say, someone who came from a 2-parent home and didn't have all those obstacles that Jeff was facing. Now, this appears to be a hypothetical in the textbook, but in reality, this type of situation is very common. And as a criminal prosecutor, I see this type of thing all the time, where we have adults that are charged with committing very serious crimes. And when you look at their criminal history, you see that they have a lengthy criminal history that extended into their childhood years. Now, I do recall that one of the students indicated in their introduction that they wanted to become a criminal defense attorney. And to that student, I would say that this hypothetical is very important to you because in situations where you find yourself having to come up with a defense for an individual like Jeff, these environmental factors, these mitigating factors, as we call them in the legal industry, would be things that you would want to highlight in your client's defense. The next topic that I wanted to discuss, which is the complete opposite of Jeff's situation, is economic and social conditions. Now, I have here that most contemporary criminologists look to factors such as economic and social conditions, which can produce strain among social groups and lead to law breaking. So I have here, let's examine fame and crime. So now with Jeff, we just talked about Jeff, and Jeff was not famous. In fact, Jeff was just a regular kid from a not so great neighborhood. The fact pattern indicated that he didn't have a job. His mother didn't really care about him. He was involved in a gang. So it's fair to say that he was not a celebrity. He didn't have a lot of money, and he just did what he felt he needed to do to survive. In other words, he engaged in gang membership and engaged in a life of crime because he felt like that's what he needed to do in order to survive and to make a living for himself. So some people may think that those environmental factors make individuals like Jeff more prone to committing crimes. But what do we say to that when I've provided you here with a list of millionaire celebrities who certainly didn't have the same types of obstacles, that Jeff had in his life, but here they are committing the same crimes, well, not exactly the same crimes, but engaging in the same deviant criminal conduct that Jeff was engaged in. And these are not B or C or D list celebrities. These are all A-list millionaire celebrities. So the question then becomes, what is their excuse for engaging in criminal activity? We have Lindsay Lohan, who is a very popular actress, and I believe your book indicates that she was arrested on DUI charges. And then there's Wesley Snipes, who everyone knows from playing in the Blade movies. He was arrested for tax evasion. Hugh Grant, another famous actor, arrested, your book indicates, for engaging in oral copulation with a prostitute. We have Kiefer Sutherland, DUI, Mel Gibson, O.J. Simpson, R. Kelly. Your book goes into detail as to why these individuals were arrested and things of that nature. But I included this in the presentation because I wanted you to see that it's not just the individuals that come from Jeff's side of the tracks that commit these criminal acts. Millionaires who don't have financial problems and who are very, very big in social circles still have the ability to engage in these kinds of activities. And the book even highlights some of the reasons why these celebrities engage in those criminal acts: failure of self-control, strain of celebrity, drug abuse and dependence. And then the question becomes, how does the criminal justice system accommodate privilege, wealth, celebrity, and fame? Does the criminal justice system treat these individuals different than people like, let's say, for example, Jeff, who doesn't have privilege or wealth or celebrity or fame? And do police and prosecutors and judges deal differently with such cases? These are things that I would like you all to think about and consider and be able to articulate in the event you should see a question like this on an exam. That is the end of the presentation. Again, these are just some snippets from your reading in Chapter 1 that I felt were very important. Please, again, don't use this as a substitute for Chapter 1. Please read Chapter 1 in its entirety. And if you all have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to email me at the email address that's listed on your syllabus, which is Charisse.r.woods@gmail.com.